Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Heater, Coordinator of Curriculum Instruction and Educational Technologies here at CLIU number 21. Um, Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic regarding social emotional learning during the pandemic. This was a session that I actually built in the summer of 2020, intended to really create some thought and interest around considerations that we should really put at the forefront of our thinking when we're talking about working with our students. And heading into March, I'll talk about our theme in a moment. We really saw a need to be able to rebrand this and bring this back, as we know that a lot of our schools in our footprint are in different areas of the reopening stage, and maybe working from hybrid to in person, have been in person for a while, but need to consider bringing students back. Maybe are working from a virtual setting and trying to integrate back into in person. So there's a lot of different models taking place. And we really think that this session will help to bridge some of those gaps and answer some questions that will drive some of our efforts moving forward in the educational landscape. So we're really excited about March because we as a team have come together, both the curriculum and instruction team, as well as our special programs team upstairs. And we're going to work together to create an entire month centered around social and emotional learning. And our theme is going to be spring into social emotional learning, as you can see here. And these are my teammates, really excited to collaborate on this. I am our school climate point of contact for the state here at RIU. And I'm very grateful to all of the teammates that have come together to make this month possible. And as you've noticed over the last couple months, you'll be able to view our offerings on our CLIU professional development site and also on our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to obtain Act 48 credits. We're going to offer, I'm actually going to have the first two sessions surrounding some big ideas regarding SEL, and my teammates are going to pick up some key trends to consider, as well as tying into some adult considerations to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And Tony is going to actually provide the potential for the esports connection into social emotional learning and how that can benefit students regardless of what educational format we're in. So really excited. Here are all my teammates that you can see here on the screen, and you'll get to know them a little bit more as the month progresses if you don't already know who they are. So today's journey, some of this will be altered a little bit based on the format of what we're doing here. And I will admit that some of the slides are busy, and I kept it that way intentionally because we don't really have the opportunity to exchange ideas and communicate in this setting of the recorded PD. But I kept the ideas there because I want you to be able to consider those if you do watch this and you do look at how to make positive changes regarding SEL in your classrooms or in your organizations. So really looking at the why, analyzing the critical areas, critical actions. I really pose some key questions, and then I also try to put out some ideas that you can immediately begin to implement into your practices to address the social emotional learning within your classroom or within your school building. I really like this graphic. I think it tells a lot about the picture and the landscape. And here within our office and at our organization, we think it's really, really important to make sure that we take a moment to really understand, and this presentation specifically is targeted at this, but really understand the task that has taken place over the last 10 to 12 months, I guess coming up on a year now, regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. So personally, I would like to thank everyone who is watching this video, not only obviously for taking in the content, but for your dedication over the last year. And I think that this sums it up a little bit in sort of a funny graphic. I caught it on social media one day. But really, the challenge has been unprecedented, unlike any other in my lifetime. And of course, has really changed the landscape quite a bit, potentially for the rest of what we know as education. So, really just wanted to take a moment to recognize that, and hopefully, as a educational community, not only locally but on the countrywide and worldwide picture, we can work together to find solutions. So, this presentation is really guided by two important organizations, and one is CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Social, Emotional, and Academic Learning. Um, you know, the second piece is PDE, and both organizations put out um, important documents to help us guide. And the Castle piece, as you can see there, their vision and mission statement really helps to integrate some important strategies focused around what their core areas are. So we're going to really explore some of the key pieces to Castle's work prior to getting into some specific strategies. But I would urge you to really take a look at take a look at their website and dive in. They really have a lot of great key resources that are targeted. They have great research. They have great links and strategies that can help you to further some of your practices. I love this quote, and I captured it from the roadmap that Castle created. You know, and this not only stands for when the pandemic hit, but it also stands currently, right? We're not really sure exactly what the future of education is going to look like, and some of the pictures starting to get cleared up a little bit as we progress into the spring here of 21. But really, the key to this entire piece, to this entire thing, centers around the quality of relationships and fostering the relationships that we have, student to student, teacher to student, teacher to teacher, teacher to community, administrator to teacher, etc. All of the relationships are really going to be the key piece to this thing, that are going to help us to sustain and be able to move forward. And when we're able to keep that at the forefront of some of our thinking, I think that it helps to make the why of what we're doing a little bit easier, a little bit more clear, right? If we keep the relationships first, and then sort of make sure that everyone is okay, if you will, I think the academics and some of the achievement piece can kind of get filled in as we move forward. Our challenge, as I talked about, and this is just a little bit more about that, is really this unprecedented shift to a new type of learning experience that this to this point in the pandemic, I'm sure just about everyone who watches this will be able to recognize and admit that they've obviously worked under conditions and worked in an environment that they've probably never experienced before. So I think our task is really as educators and as school leaders to make sure we bring everyone together, or make attempts to try to bring everyone together and continue to bring everyone together. So I really think even now, in late February of 21 and moving into the spring and next school year, if you will, that this challenge is still going to remain and be just as important as ever, right? This idea that we've all gone through a lot together, and how do we work together to make sure that we can once again create that cohesion and create that sense of school community, and create a shared vision and mission of what we want to try to accomplish. Um, I've captured a quick video that I do want to utilize in this recording, because I think when I watched it, it was of Amanda Gorman, who was a youth poet laureate a few years back, the first one actually ever named. And I really thought it was beautiful. And it's only a minute or two, but I think if there was something I took away from it, it was the word hope, right? And when we talk about social emotional learning and relationship building, this this key idea of hope, I think, is critical. So just bear with me 1 second while I pull this up.
We honor our three captains for their actions and impact in a time of uncertainty and need. They've taken the lead, exceeding all expectations and limitations, uplifting their communities and neighbors as leaders, healers, and educators. James has felt the wounds of warfare, but this warrior still shares his home with at-risk kids. During COVID, he's even lent a hand live streaming football for family and fans. Tremaine is an educator who works nonstop, providing his community with hotspots, laptops, and tech workshops so his students have all the tools they need to succeed in life and in school. Susie is the ICU nurse manager at a Tampa hospital. Her chronicles prove that even in tragedy, hope is possible. She lost her grandmothers to the pandemic and fights to save other lives in the ICU battle zone, defining the frontline heroes, risking their lives for our own. Let us walk with these warriors, charge on with these champions, and carry forth the call of our captains. We celebrate them by acting with courage and compassion, by doing what is right and just. For while we honor them today, it is they who every day honor us. Today.
So as you can see there, and I'm a really big fan of that piece. I think, if you're unfamiliar with it, Amanda was honoring the honorary captains of the Super Bowl. But if we can capture an idea there, each of those professionals worked in service and really focused within their realms and within their responsibilities of they really focused on making sure to maintain relationships and put forth their best effort to create the best service that they could to those that they were serving. So I think when we talk about this idea of hope and moving forward, I think that video really does a nice job of capturing that idea and providing hope for us as an educational community. So, so Mike, what are you saying we do? Well, CASEL put together this wonderful roadmap, and I have it linked at the end of this presentation, and we're surely not going to go through it one exact piece at a time. But what we are going to do is really try to highlight some of the key critical practices, and then draw out some activities that I think are easily considered and have the potential to be easily implemented within the classroom and within the school building, regardless of age group, really, in a lot of cases. And then I tied in some additional ideas that I think are really interesting and can be useful. Maybe take some additional creativity, but we're going to start and progress through some of this roadmap. So again, just looking at our reality, the reality of this presentation is I'm potentially going to be viewed by people who are working in any of these three circles, or a combination of these three circles. There are educators out there who are offering in-person education, as well as the responsibility of providing virtual education. And all of this really makes up this idea of hybrid. So hopefully that when we start to move through some of the ideas that I'm going to discuss, you can implement and adapt based on your current environment. And I will also say, I'll probably mention it again at some point during this, but feel free to reach out to me at any time. We are very blessed here within our department to have strong relationships with many of our school buildings and school districts. So if there is something you're considering, or you are looking for more ideas regarding this sort of big umbrella of hybrid education, feel free to reach out. as we start to move into this, one really critical piece that I think is necessary when we start to talk about the social and emotional health within our organizations is the ability to look through a little bit of a trauma lens. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this does take some training and a little bit of practice, but it's really the ability to look a little bit deeper into situations, to have some flexibility, understanding, and compassion for those around us. And I think really to be careful to jump to conclusions when we're working with students and also fellow colleagues or parents or families. The ability to understand that they have past experiences and they have past emotions that may impact how they act or what they do. And although it takes, like I said, some practice and work, it's really an important skill when we're talking about the social and emotional learning aspect of the educational process. So, in definition, when we start to talk about, well, Mike, what is social and emotional learning? Well, what CASEL really says is, as you can see in this graphic, at the center is this sort of big concept, right? And then around it is I should say, self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And I'm going to build each one of those out a little bit. And hopefully, this presentation really lends itself well to some of the additional pieces that will be launched throughout March. But what you can see around that then are classrooms, which are made up of SEL curriculum and instruction, schools, which of course instill the practices that take place within those classrooms. And then, of course, the big outer ring is really how we extend out to home and communities and create those partnerships and foster those relationships that I've spoken about to make sure that the entire piece sort of comes together and fits properly. So first and foremost, and what I've done on the next 4 to 5 slides is really to give us the big idea, define it a little bit, and then how that concept has adapted a little bit in the blue side of the slide to uh, uh, pandemic times, right? So first is this idea of self-awareness. And when I talk about each of these topics, I'm really talking about broader sense, students and adults alike, whether it be colleagues or parents or administrators, whatever the case. But really the self-awareness piece is one of the first building blocks or understanding ourselves and our current states, right? And we now know that in the pandemic time that this has shifted a little bit because there have been additional or more complex or additional complexities now added, right? This self-awareness piece has taken on a little bit more regarding how we feel and the things that we've gone through. Specifically, we have concerns for students who have struggled to maintain connections to their school community. So this characteristic has really taken on a little bit more of some complex characteristics. So once we have that self-awareness piece, how do we manage, right? So we kind of are able to understand ourselves and understand the way we feel. How do we manage that? And there's really been a lot of work done over the last 10 to 12 months, specifically with students and managing some of these things while they're not in our presence in person, right? And additionally, a lot of work has been done in the self-care piece where we as adults are making sure that we're trying to take care of ourselves, right? So the first piece is critical. That awareness piece is critical to be able to obviously take care of the management, but I would say equally important for the entire well-being of ourselves as individuals. as we hopefully are taking care of ourselves and we're aware of ourselves, we can next begin to understand how we fit socially, or how, what is our perspective when we talk about our communications and experiences with others, right? So, this ability to take on perspective and empathize, and as I talked about, have the trauma lens, right? To understand the social and cultural and ethnic norms of others. And we know that this is really a big topic as of late regarding the equity lens, and that's some work that I've really done a lot of different research in over the last year as well, beginning to understand how how I as an individual am able to be aware of what's going on around me and have the ability to look through multiple lenses to gain an understanding. So once we have that awareness, how do we then cultivate that into working and creating relationships with others? And how do we maintain those relationships and foster new relationships? Specifically, when we talk about working with our students and working with other stakeholders, how do we sort of understand our social awareness and then be able to harness that and push that in a direction to create positive relationships with others? And again, this is really the big idea that I've talked about as sort of the theme, I guess, when you talk about social and emotional learning, is really all about relationship building, right? So this key piece here, this fourth characteristic, if you will, is really the critical piece. So we've gained an understanding of ourselves. We understand how to manage ourselves. We have a social awareness of what's going on around us. Now, how do we drive that forward and create positive relationships that will allow us to create successful environments? And then, of course, at the end of it is hopefully we're educating others, and we're working with others, and we ourselves are practicing responsible decision making as it pertains to personal behavior and social interactions. So, this idea of setting an example for others, allowing our actions in a sense to speak for us, so others can learn from that and understand, hopefully, somewhat of a model of how we want others to look. So, based on those big ideas, what CASEL has done is created 4 critical practices in their roadmap to consider. And the one that I'll spend probably a few more slides than others on during this second half of this presentation is really the third one. But I don't want to be remiss to not mention each, because all of these are going to be called out in March at some point during our PD series. But you can see there at the top, it's taking time to cultivate and deepen relationships. Secondly, design opportunities where adults can make sure that they connect, heal, etc. And then third, really a focus on the student aspect and creating a safe, supportive, and equitable learning environment. And then lastly, using the information and data that we have to drive continuous improvement. And what you can see there, I've done in blue, is really tried to call out the portion, if you will, of the educational community, of our stakeholder groups that each critical practice pertains to. So I don't want to put more weight in one than the other, but for the sake of this month, really that third one is going to be most of our practice, with a bit of an emphasis on the second one regarding adults as we move toward the end of the month. So when we look at the first one, what I've done in each critical practice is offered some key questions to be answered. And I'm not, of course, in this half hour to 40-minute discussion going to go deep dive into each one, but I did make sure to keep them in this presentation so that you have them as key pieces to think about when you're thinking about your own practices within the classroom, within the bigger picture of the school building, and when you work with others. So again, this presentation is really a high level splash, but I think these considerations are critical if you really want to make a difference in the social and emotional health of others around you. So this first one really gets into making sure that we take time to deepen, cultivate, foster relationships, and some strategies that we can utilize to make sure that we're doing that, right? So you can see here, I try to list some really concrete ideas that can be integrated very easily, not only in the school building, but I think in the classroom environment. And most importantly, I think no matter where we fall in the hybrid uh, piece, whether we're fully in person, virtual, a mix, whatever the case, I think that these are strategies that can be adapted for the most part. Um, I really love number 6, which is why it's bolded. But I think we've got to create some form of plan, schedule, calendar to make sure that no matter where we are in our learning environments, that we're deliberately taking time to make sure that we are rebuilding and fostering the learning environment. So this isn't something that I think we can sort of just put a lesson in and hope that our students get it. I think it's got to be deliberate. I think it's got to be planned, and I think it's got to be really a priority to make sure that we are calling out the importance of this topic. I heard a strategy actually yesterday in the session that I was in that I love, which is really just 1 minute check-ins. So in this case, it was, excuse me, a school counselor who took a moment to just do 1 minute check-ins with each student in her building. And she focused on a few key questions that she made sure she wanted answered in those check-ins. I really love that idea because she took the time to make sure that all of the students and all of the families within her community were at least, she made a reach out, right? And she made an effort and she gave the families the ability to have quick check in offerings to give back to her to make sure that she was able to collect some information and then drive her future efforts based on that. Now, I'm sure some people are listening and thinking, man, that's a big task, and you're right. But I think it really goes the extra mile to make sure that we are cultivating and fostering the relationships that we have within our educational community. The second critical action is really focused around adults, and we're actually going to build an entire session around this with Carly and Rosemary here, who are part of our resiliency team, and they do a great job with self-care trainings and trauma-informed practices work. So I'm not going to get too deep into this one, but I don't want to de-emphasize the importance of making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And of course, we're trying to take care of others around us if we can. So some key pieces here, or some key strategies that we may want to consider here. We see some ideas here that may work. I really like number 2, which of course may take some planning, building wide. But I think we can build this idea of check-ins and tap in, tap out protocol a little bit easier. And what I mean by that is just making sure that we take time each day to sort of check in with our colleagues. Hey, how you doing? How's everything going? What's going on? Is everything okay? Taking 10 or 15 minutes to really foster that relationship within a workday. And of course, we need to be appropriate with those contacts and make sure that they fall within the right context of our workday. But I think if we can do that, it really, really goes a long way with making sure that we're okay as adults and as educators. So you can kind of see some ideas here that you might be able to implement. But again, we're going to get into a lot more of this as we drive deeper into our March PD offerings. This is really the big idea, and you're going to see, and I know that this is a busy slide, and again, that's intentional, but this is probably going to be the main drive of our efforts in March, this idea of creating safe, supportive, and equitable learning environments. And again, this idea of equity really asks us as educators that to make sure that we're providing exactly what our students need at that right moment, despite any type of characteristics they may have, whether it be racial, social, emotional, cultural, gender, etc. That we're making sure that regardless of the student makeup, that we're trying to provide them what they need to be successful. So this is a big task, right? This critical practice is really a big bite, but I'll try to give you a couple ideas. And again, this is going to be the focus of probably 3 of our sessions moving forward. Uh, so one thing I wanted to show you, and this idea of these virtual wellness rooms is something that I think is really, really powerful. The one that I'm going to actually display for this PD session is Capital Area IU's virtual wellness room that they've created. And as I take us out there, I just want to show you that they were able to use a Google site. And what they've done is they've created really several pages of different links and strategies that they can utilize with their students, whether it be synchronous or asynchronous, for student social and emotional health. So you can see here, they have links to calming tools, self-care, grounding techniques. They have a page here for some creativity, creative therapy, if you will, or creative experiences that students can use to get a little bit more grounded. They have some mindfulness techniques associated and embedded right in from YouTube, that students and staff really can utilize. Uh, they offer links to some game links that students can utilize. I can speak personally. I enjoy a game or two to sort of have some. For me, it's a way to shut my brain off and not really focus on anything too deep, but really just allow the game to sort of let me decompress, if you will. And they have some key resources here linked as well that you can see. So I really want to make sure I show this as an example. Of course, I know the resources are not out there for everyone to be able to create a virtual wellness center or a virtual wellness room, if you will. But Capital Area IU has offered this. You're free to be able to take a look at some of the links and utilize them with some of your students in your classroom or in your environment. But I wanted to make sure I did offer this and allow you to be able to access some of the ideas as a strategy. So again, just jumping back out to the presentation, CASEL has 3 signature practices when they talk about social and emotional learning. And I think if as an educator, we're going to have a starting point of how to create SEL friendly lessons, regardless of content. If we can keep these 3 signature practices at the forefront of what we're doing, I think we're off to a great start. And the first is really to create a welcoming activity or an inclusive activity, making students want to join our lessons, making students want to be part of what we're trying to accomplish for that day or for that week or for that unit is really, really going to go a long way. I think if we can create engaging strategies, implement brain breaks and engaging transitions, if you will, it's going to drive students to want to stay with us, right? So there's that piece of activating that welcoming message, but then how do we keep them engaged throughout the day? One strategy I had heard and saw some research presented on was this idea of remote coaches, right? Having educators or support staff guide students through the day to help to keep them engaged and to help to keep them where we want them regarding their focus on education, right? We're talking 5, 6, 7 hour Zoom days or virtual learning days, which can be quite a bit for students regardless of age group. And then lastly, closing out our lessons or our contacts with people optimistically, right? So giving them an optimistic way to look at, hey, enjoy the rest of your day. Here's what's coming tomorrow. We hope to see you there. Giving them something that makes them want to come back and makes them want to join us for more of this educational journey. So I really want to make sure to embed some of these signature practices in this discussion, because I think these are three big ideas that if we can keep them at the forefront of what we're doing as educators, we can really move in the right direction. I have some additional ideas here, and again, this is going to be the drive for some of our additional sessions during the month of March. But I think number 2 is the one that I want to make sure that I drew out, and this is really making sure that we try to create socialize and connect opportunities is the way it's worded, but I really think it's just opportunities to make sure students have the ability to remain and stay connected regardless of how much we actually see them in person. And this is a big challenge and a big idea. And one way that we're going to pitch that here at RIU is this idea of esports, which Antonio and our department's going to talk about in March during one of these PD sessions. But I've seen things like virtual dance parties and virtual dances and virtual homecoming events and all these different ideas that come together to allow students to stay connected to the school community and remain part of that educational vision and mission are really, really critical to this key practice. And lastly, the last key practice that CASEL calls out is this idea of using data to move forward. And some of the strategies that I've highlighted would allow us to gather some of this data and take a look at, what are some of the trends. And my second session that's going to actually follow this one is going to really look at the second half and moving into the second half of the school year and utilizing some of the data that we've had, which can be achievement data, attendance data, engagement data, to drive some of the practices moving forward. Now that we've lived through 10 to 12 months of this pandemic, what are we going to do moving forward? Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we've seen some saddening attendance rates, achievement rates, and engagement rates. So we now know that we've got to make change, and we've got to put this SEL piece at the forefront. So how do we utilize those numbers, and what do we do with that? And that's something that we're going to talk about a bit more in the second session following this one. So you can see here some additional ideas when we start to talk about how do we use this information. So in closure, as I wrap up this brief presentation, and again, I know some of the pace of that was a bit much, and I want to reiterate that this is a session that I can build out and we can bring to entire school bodies, individual buildings, really whatever the case, if we want to dive into this and start to consider some of these critical practices in much more detail. But I urge you, if you're watching this, to be a leader in this field, and to set an example for others around you regarding social and emotional health. And what I mean by that is really try to make a difference when it comes to relationship building, and not just with your students, but also with your colleagues and with parents and with other stakeholders within the educational community. I think if we as individuals take on this task as a leader, I think others around us, this will become a little bit contagious, because it is positive, it is optimistic, and it is uplifting. And I think if others around us can see us trying to take care of ourselves and then make sure everyone else around us is okay, and I don't mean that in terms of test scores or achievement, if you will. I mean that in terms of really being okay, being healthy in several aspects of our lives. I am personally hopeful that it will catch on with others. So I close with just a couple links out to some of these tools. I include the CASEL Guide for Reopening, uh, the Pennsylvania Department of Education Staff and Wellness Guide, which is really meant to be used as a checklist and allow us to take a look at where we do need to focus more of our efforts. And of course, the roadmap, which was really the blueprint for a lot of what I talked about within the last 30 to 40 minutes. So I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'm hopeful to hopefully gain some views and allow you to expand some of your practices and make sure we're taking care of ourselves out there. I, as a previous teacher, principal, coach, and now curriculum coordinator, really see the value in some of this work. And I'm happy to be the school climate point of contact at our IU. And if there's anything you ever need, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.